So welcome to the closing session of the 9th edition of the Global Days of Action on Tax Justice for Women's Rights. My name is Maureen Mburu. I work with GATJ and I'm the moderator for this particular session. So over the past 2 weeks, we have raised our voices, shared powerful insights, and strengthened our collective fight for a fair and a feminist economy under the campaign banner, Progressive Taxation for an Inclusive and Just Social Organization of Care. This campaign has reaffirmed a simple but urgent truth. Tax justice is gender justice. Our economies cannot continue to rely on the invisible, undervalued, and unpaid labor of women, while tax systems favor the wealthiest and deprive gender transformative public services of much needed funding. We are here to demand change. And just to reaffirm our brief, our campaign demands: 1, progressive taxation for a gender transformative social organization of care. 2, incorporate gender transformative provisions into the UN Tax Convention. 3, increase public investment in care public services. 4, acknowledge and value unpaid care work in economic systems. And 5, ensure gender equality in tax systems and public services. As we gather here for this final session, let us celebrate our progress, assess the challenges, and reflect on our key takeaways, and most importantly, commit to taking this fight forward. During this 2-week period, we've had a total of 17 activities that have been undertaken, as well as a lot of social media action and engagement through our various platforms. In addition, we were able to amplify our campaign demands through targeted blogs that were developed by our Tax and Gender Working Group members, circulating and amplifying our demand on each day last week. To usher us into the reflection, in part 1, we'll have our panel who will engage us in about 30 minutes or so, sharing some key takeaways from this campaign, as well as key actions that we need to continue doing to realize our advocacy objectives. In the second part, we will have a presentation by Graphic Harvest on who will be presenting key campaign visuals and just how they translate when you're looking at the broader campaign demands. In this webinar, please note that we have simultaneous translation available in Spanish and French. We will also have translation in English when one of our speakers will be sharing in Spanish. Feel free as well to use the Q&A box to share your reflections, your challenges, and your proposals on any way forward, as well as any questions that you might have. I will now introduce the panelists as they come in to speak. And to start us off, I will introduce Reshma Shakya. Reshma organizes campaigns on women's rights, labor rights, food sovereignty, and economic justice in South Asia and least developing countries. Collaborating with networks like Fight Inequality Alliance and Tax and Fiscal Justice Asia, she emphasizes gender justice. She is associated with LDC Watch and the South Asia Alliance for Poverty Eradication. Welcome, Reshma, and as you're taking the floor, please tell us how has the campaign advanced public understanding of progressive taxation and gender transformative public services? What key narratives resonate the most with activists, policymakers, and the public?
Hello. Hi, may I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Maureen, for introducing me and giving an opportunity to share about our campaigns during the Global Week of Actions on Tax Justice for Women's Rights 2025. So regarding your questions, while reflecting on the Global Days of Actions on Tax Justice for Women's Rights, we LDC was SAAPE, South Asia Alliance for Poverty Eradications, mobilized the campaigns and also the network members along with TAFJA Asia working groups. They actively participated in initiatives that deepen the public understanding of progressive taxations. And throughout the campaigns, various events and initiatives emphasize emphasize the importance of progressive taxation in funding essential public services that empower women and promote gender equality. For instance, the General Federation of Nepalese Trade Unions, GFONT, which is a big trade union federations of the Nepal, and also the campaign member of SAAPE, organized the events focusing on care work during the Global Days of Actions 2025. So these initiatives underscore the critical role of care labor, which is predominantly undertaken by women, and also advocated for policies to support the caregivers. Additionally, from 13 to 14 March 2025, SAAPE, in collaboration with the organization including the Prakasha, based on the Indonesia, Tax Justice Network Indonesia, Salforest, which is a research organizations, and Oxfam in Asia, hosted a capacity building workshop in Bangkok. And this event enhance or aim to enhance the advocacy skills of the Asian civil society organizations concerning the proposed UN Tax Convention, with particularly emphasis on the intersection of taxation and the gender justice. This events is really successful and encourage the CSOs that they still have the opportunity to advocate for the inclusion of gender equality in the decision making protocols of the UN tax conventions by 2027. So CSOs can continue to push for tax policies that address gender justice and strengthening advocacy efforts in the coming years, which will be crucial to ensuring that gender responsive tax measures are integrated into the conventions frameworks. So during mobilizing the campaigns and organizing the different events on care work, UN tax framework conventions, so we have several key narratives emerged from the campaign members and the activists. So campaign members expressed that we underscore that equitable taxation is the foundational to reducing the income inequality, aligning with our advocacy for fair economic growth in both developed and also in the developing countries. They also expressed that highlighting the economic value of unpaid care work. We advocated for tax policies that support caregiving services. So resonating with feminist movements and also commitment to women's empowerment. Similarly, they express regarding the global solidarities, the campaigners and the activists stated that our collaboration with international partners, which will reinforce the need for a unified approach to tax reforms, appealing to policymakers and civil society organizations globally. Furthermore, the most interesting part is during the capacity building of the CSOs to strengthen the advocacy in the UN Tax Convention. There is a commitment from the representatives regarding the submission of demand letters from the CSOs to the member of parliament in Pakistan, advocating for the inclusion of gender consideration in the UN tax conventions. So these are some concerted efforts the campaign has significantly advance the public understanding of the progressive taxation and gender transformative public services. Thank you. This is from my side.
Thank you. That was truly amazing. And it's actually really good to hear even practical examples of how this has worked in Asia. And happy to even hear about the memoranda that is being done. So on to our next speaker. I will introduce Flora Santos, or as she's fondly called, Tita Flo. She is a social worker by profession and is a pillar of the Philippine social justice movement. Flora is the president of Oriang and is one of the vibrant women founders of the Oriang Women's Movement that was launched on March 8th, 2016 in Manila. She's also the convener and the founder of K4K QC, a movement of marginalized sectors in Quezon City, fighting for their rights to livelihood, health, environment, and decent shelter. In addition, she's the current vice president of Sanlakas, a multi-sector organization with 150 active members. Welcome, Flora, and you can help us to understand this question. How can we better integrate diverse voices, particularly from the grassroots and the frontline care workers, especially women, for the next campaign? Sorry, Flora, we can't hear you. So let's give Flora just a minute.
Okay. Hello? Is it okay?
Hello, yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Ayan. Tinanggal ko muna.
Okay. Good evening to everyone who is on the panel. Thank you for including me in the panel. My work here in the Philippines it's not just women, it's a community-based grassroots organizing. In doing my organizing work with the grassroots, that our campaign on tax issue, working for a tax justice, is very important to the life of our Filipino people, especially the women. Why it's very important is because, as you all know, that the situation of the women, Filipino women, are really very, very poor, and most of them are very poor. So with the tax burden issue, it increases more problems to the women. Aside from the gender issue, there are other issues that we experience here. So the importance of organizing women to understand their gender, their sectoral issues, has to be done a good campaign so that it has to be the collective voices of the women has really have to be broadened and more stronger. As you all know that the collective work of our Oriang women's movement had been continuing, and as I said, if the victories that we got here is very important, like the legislative, how we work for the policies, like the demands that we are doing now is we should have a wealth tax, fighting for a wealth tax, so that to lessen the burden of women. In terms of the formal workers, who are working on the call centers, the export processing zones, most of them are earning very low. Okay, because of the situation, the problem is the taxation system here in the Philippines favors the corporation, meaning the corporation got incentives and then they have also holidays. So we feel that there are injustices happens in the taxation system in the Philippines. The second issue in relation to tax is the regressive tax system. For example, the value-added tax, wherein in all commodities, all the sales system, the taxation on sales it affects the life of the poor. So, what happened to their lives is the more they got more poor because of this value-added tax. So we had also a continuing campaign for this, that it has to be removed, the value-added tax. So as I said, the women's voices is very important. That's why there should be more awareness. But of course, like for now, we have about 5,000 members of Oriang Women's Movement in different chapters, and we had different activities, campaign activities to get them aware, and then come up with collective action, no, concerted effort, so that government, local, national government has to respond to the demands of our women's movement here in the Philippines, like Oriang Women's Movement. So that's the as I said, it's not only the gender that we're facing here in the Philippines, but more issues, economic, issue of housing, issue of climate issues, and political issues, especially now at present, wherein we have a problem here, our ex-president, no? So different parties is fighting, the two parties is fighting, and the grassroots, with the suffering of the grassroots, what happened is the government have their own problem, and the public services that people has to receive is not being done. So, as I said, we should, the women has to continue its organizing work and awareness building, so that economic, political power, empowering women is very important. That's my sharing, Maureen. Thank you. If you have some question, I can share. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so rightly put. Thank you so much. Apologies, I'm having a bit of a cold. And just a reminder as well, for the participants who are present, feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat box to share any reflections or comments or questions, even to the panelists as we are going along. And just also to remind you that we have simultaneous translation that is available in French and in Spanish. Our next speaker is Grace Arina. Grace is a distinguished Kenyan lawyer with expertise in corporate legal practice. Moreover, she's a policy analyst and a researcher keen on integrating gendered perspectives into economic policies. She employs a feminist approach to macroeconomic analysis in the thematic areas of tax justice, debt justice, bank governance, business and human rights, and in the care economy, emphasizing the significance of alleviating gender disparities in the global south and promoting inclusive economic growth. So for you, Grace, please tell us what are the biggest risks moving forward, particularly regarding privatization of care, regressive taxation, and corporate tax avoidance?
I hope you can see and hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you, Maureen, for that introduction. So I'll jump right into my answer. So first and foremost, the privatization of care, as we all know, is a facet of neoliberal ideology, which is very profit-centric. It promotes profit over people. And the privatization of care, to be specific, is problematic because it relegates the burden of care to women, who then have to step in to become the shock absorbers and take over the duty to care. So I'll give an example of the care economy in Kenya, for example, and domestic care work to be specific, and the privatization of the same that has been taken over by the private sector as they have stepped in to fill a very crucial need. How, for example, there's several companies and mobile applications such as My Nanny, which purport to provide experienced and workers with expertise and qualifications. But what this does is that it effectively blocks out those with little to no expertise and those who can't afford these services. So the call here is to the state to reclaim their duty to care and to restore the duty to care to the government. Moreover, the regressive taxation, the over-reliance of regressive taxation frameworks in the global south is as a result of, as we know, international financial institutions that have, under the guise rather of promoting foreign direct investment within the global south. However, the song that played in the beginning, just to reflect the sentiment of the song, we are calling for the government to rewrite the rules and make taxes work for women. So a progressive approach, conversely, is a pro-poor approach that transfers or shifts the burden, or rather, to use the most common word, redistributes the burden of regressive taxation from the poor to multinationals and to high net worth individuals. So to reiterate the call, rewrite the rules, make taxes work for women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing these wonderful insights. I can go to our last speaker, definitely not least. She's a very strong speaker. We have Verónica Serafini. She's an economist with a master's degree in social sciences from Flaxco, Mexico, and a PhD in economics from UNAM, Mexico. She is currently a gender and economics advisor and coordinator of the Feminist Economics Working Group at Latindadd. For you, Verónica, how can we ensure governments move from commitments to action in financing gender transformative care systems?
Bueno, muchas gracias por la invitación. I am talking in Spanish. If you want to change to translator, please, the moment. Thank you. Well, this is a
Yes,
very...
so please, if you want to
Esa es
switch your language, just proceed.
La pregunta es una pregunta bastante compleja, porque tiene muchas aristas, tanto a nivel global como a nivel local o nacional. Pero creo que una de las respuestas más relevantes es la de la necesidad de crear argumentos, de generar argumentos y generar información y datos que nos permitan justificar la importancia de los cuidados transformadores. ¿Y por qué digo eso? Porque lastimosamente en el ámbito de lo social, de las políticas sociales y de las mujeres en particular, nos obligan a tener muchos más argumentos que lo que es, por ejemplo, la guerra. Fíjense que ahora, con la crisis, con el conflicto global que hay, no hay problema de aumentar el gasto en defensa. Sin argumentos, sin cifras, pero desde las mujeres nosotras necesitamos siempre tener una cifra, un número que justifique que nuestras demandas. Por ejemplo, en América Latina, en este momento estamos tratando de generar información que nos permita argumentar por qué las inversiones de cuidados tienen retornos económicos. Es decir, invertir en los niños y en las niñas e invertir en que las mujeres salgan a trabajar tiene retornos económicos para el crecimiento económico. Ese es un argumento. Finalmente, instrumental en el sentido de que considera no los derechos de las personas a ser cuidadas y los derechos de las mujeres a tener autonomía económica, sino finalmente el retorno económico. Pero de todos modos, esa producción es importante, como la que se está haciendo en Global Alliance, en términos de demostrar cómo los impuestos tienen que cambiar para que beneficien a las mujeres. Y uno de esos cambios importantes es el que señalaron Flora y Grace antes, que es el de transformar nuestros sistemas tributarios basados en impuestos indirectos hacia impuestos directos. Y ese es un tema fundamental para construir sistemas de cuidado transformadores. Nosotros podemos pensar en sistemas de cuidado transformadores por el lado del gasto, es decir, ¿qué creamos? Atención para las personas mayores, creamos atención para los niños y niñas, para las personas con discapacidad, pero en realidad no van a ser transformadores si están financiados con impuestos indirectos que las propias mujeres con su consumo crean en el Estado. Nunca vamos a tener sistemas que redistribuyan el tiempo y redistribuyan el ingreso si finalmente financiamos sistemas de cuidado con impuestos indirectos. Y menos todavía con exoneraciones tributarias. Por ejemplo, en países de América Latina estamos discutiendo si las exoneraciones tributarias son útiles o no. Y gracias a una investigación encontramos que las exoneraciones tributarias al cuidado o las deducciones al cuidado tienen dos efectos. Por un lado, benefician a los sectores más ricos y a los hombres más ricos, porque son los que pueden salir a comprar servicios privados de cuidados y deducir eso de sus impuestos. Pero por otro lado también es un incentivo indirecto a las privatizaciones. Es decir, le decimos a la sociedad, si ustedes compran servicios privatizados, van a tener deducciones de impuestos. Entonces, finalmente, algo que parecía positivo termina siendo negativo, porque resta recursos para poder construir sistemas de cuidados universales. Por eso son importantes los datos, generar información, porque nos permite dialogar con cifras con los gobiernos. Por otro lado, esos datos también, esa información o esos datos nos permiten tener una mejor comunicación con los movimientos sociales. Porque hay muchos movimientos feministas que no conocen los temas tributarios y que necesitan que desde quienes trabajamos los temas tributarios podamos mostrarles estas cifras. Eso es importante porque si desde el movimiento de mujeres y el movimiento feminista no se genera la demanda de cuidados, los gobiernos tampoco van a implementar políticas de cuidados. Todas las políticas surgen a partir de las luchas. Hasta ahora a las mujeres nadie nos dio nada gratis o porque los políticos quisieron. Todas nuestras demandas y todo lo que ganamos a lo largo de estos años fue gracias a la lucha del movimiento de mujeres y a la lucha del movimiento feminista. Por eso es fundamental que desde organizaciones como Global Alliance o las organizaciones que trabajamos temas tributarios podamos construir esa información y proveer esos insumos a las campañas. Y ese es otro tema. Generar campañas de concientización que nos permitan llegar a públicos mucho más amplios que el del movimiento de mujeres o las demandas de mujeres, porque esos son públicos que apoyan también a las demandas que hagamos frente a los gobiernos. Y finalmente también creo que es importante atender otros aspectos de los sistemas tributarios y de los sistemas de cuidados, que es la deuda. Necesitamos mirar con atención la deuda porque los países, por ejemplo, los países latinoamericanos, después de muchos años sin presiones por la deuda externa, ahora están sintiendo fuertes presiones. Y hoy el servicio de la deuda o los intereses que pagamos por la deuda son superiores inclusive al gasto en salud. La deuda es la contraparte del el otro lado de sistemas tributarios que no funcionan. Si no recaudamos recursos, nos endeudamos. Y finalmente la deuda termina siendo pagada por la población en general, con sus impuestos o con la austeridad. Influir en cuando hablamos de influencia en los gobiernos o de incidencia en los gobiernos, para cumplir los compromisos, tenemos que construir las narrativas con datos y narrativas integrales que nos permitan ver a la política fiscal como un todo integrado, sin cambios reales en la política fiscal, que tiene dos componentes muy importantes además del gasto, los tributos y la deuda. Va a ser muy difícil que consigamos recursos para construir sistemas de cuidado transformadores. Podemos avanzar en sistemas de cuidado, pero precarios, de baja calidad, de baja cobertura y sobre todo financiados de manera injusta. Porque definitivamente, si los financiamos con impuestos indirectos, no van a ser sistemas de cuidado transformadores. Entonces, cuando hablamos de sistemas de cuidado transformadores, tenemos que mirar los dos lados, el lado del gasto y también el lado del financiamiento. Y bueno, para eso son importantes todas estas actividades que estamos haciendo: construir conocimiento, construir campañas, y construir con ese conocimiento, esas campañas y ese trabajo, construir también conjuntamente la demanda por sistemas de cuidados de calidad. Y ahí me quiero quedar, Maureen, para dar tiempo al debate. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And I think you have truly shared some of the very good and very key points, and in terms of just how we can actually transform this into commitments and what exactly the governments can be able to do. I see no comments or questions in the chat, so then I can take the panelists through the very last question. And in this and for this one, we can do different formats. So we can start with the last speaker, going all the way back to the first speaker. So we can start with you, Veronica, again. And I know some of these things you've already alluded to when you were sharing when you were giving us some remarks. But then maybe very briefly, how do we sustain the momentum beyond the Global Days of Action 2025 and integrate tax justice into broader feminist and labor rights struggles?
Bueno, yo creo que estos espacios son fundamentales, pero necesitamos, como tú dices, Maureen, extender esto a todo el año, no solamente un mes en particular, y encontrar puntos en común. Este año en América Latina van a haber varios eventos y estamos trabajando en esos varios eventos. Una conferencia regional de la mujer en México, donde se va a discutir cómo construimos una sociedad del cuidado. También tenemos el proceso de financiamiento para el desarrollo en Sevilla, España. Tenemos diferentes tipos de congresos de economía feminista donde se incorporan todos estos temas. Creo que tenemos una gran oportunidad desde la economía feminista, desde quienes trabajamos la economía feminista, de quienes están en los movimientos sociales y de quienes están en la organización, en la sociedad civil organizada, de que confluyan todas estas partes y de que podamos tener una incidencia en el largo plazo. necesitamos hacer eso, ¿no? Necesitamos planificar, necesitamos trabajar más en conjunto y sobre todo poder vincularnos a partir de los problemas propios de cada una de las regiones del sur global. No todas las regiones son iguales y necesitamos conocernos y conocer esas diferentes visiones desde los países distintos, porque tenemos diferencias, pero fundamentalmente nos une estos dos temas: sistemas tributarios más justos y sistemas de cuidado transformadores que garanticen, en ambos casos, que garanticen en primer lugar los derechos a cuidar, a ser cuidado y al autocuidado con un financiamiento justo. Gracias.
Thank you, Veronica. Yes, Flora, I can see your hand is up.
Yes, Maureen and comrades. Here in the
Sorry, we cannot
Philippines-
hear you, Flora.
No sound? Hello? Sound na naman.
Yeah, we can
Hello?
hear you, Flora.
Can you listen?
Okay, all right, sorry. So then I think it was just on my end.
Is it okay?
Yeah, I can hear. But I
Hello?
don't know.
Oh, what happened?
Okay.
Okay. Here in the Philippines, what is happening? The picture of our comrade Reshma is Maureen, I would like to clarify with you. Can you hear me? Can you?
Yes, we
Yes?
can hear you.
Yeah, okay. Here in the Philippines, I think there is a need to continue our campaign, no? It's not just enough for 1 week, 2 weeks, especially here. As I said, the taxation is very problematic here in the Philippines, and our demands have not met yet. The one demands that we would like to be to meet is the wealth tax, because as I said, these regressive taxes that is ongoing here in our country had affected a lot of lives of our people, especially our women who are really carry the burden of this taxation in relation to the needs of the family. Okay, and especially now, the prices of goods here in the Philippines had increased, and even the payments of public services like water, power, etc. So I think there's really a need to continue our campaign for tax justice, because it really become more poor. The people become more poor, and their power, what's this? The power of to buy the needs of the family. They cannot meet it. So, as I said, the need to continue our organizing, to expand it, to strengthen it, and more voices has to be heard, and it has to be connected to other sector. No, women's movement has to be aligned or have some collision with other sector, so that this issue of tax justice has to be met at all costs. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Reshma, I can see your hand is up.
Yeah, Maureen. So I just want to share that we all know that sustaining the momentum is not an easy task, but still we continue the campaigns because it is the major issues. Because most of the times the tax issues are taken as a technical issues, but it's some kinds of political issues. So for the momentums, for the sustainability of the campaigns, So we can strengthening the alliance, some kinds of building partnership with the feminist movements and the global alliance network, such as many global networks who are working on the same issues and same goals, such as the Fight Inequality Alliance in the global level and the regional levels, tax justice networks, women trade unions, leaders, and tax justice who are advocating to create a unified front. So I think these collaborations amplify our voices and enhance our advocacy. Also, we can actively engage with the policymakers to promote tax reforms that address the gender disparities by participating in consultations and providing the grassroots perspective, so we can influence in the policy changes which will be benefited to all of us. So we can also organize the nationals, regional level workshops to educate our campaign members, network members about the tax systems, awareness campaigns, policy advocacy campaigns, and what are their rights and how the regressive taxing is impacting for the gender. So by empowering with knowledge, so that individual can also advocate for themselves and hold systems accountable. Similarly, through the online and offline media campaigns, we can share the personal experience that highlight the connection between the tax justice and women's labors and the social security issues, mostly in the informal and domestic worker rights. So these narratives can also humanize the issues and build the broader public supports. So I think this approach align with our commitments to build the economic justice and gender equality in the regions. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are very wonderful last comments from everyone. Grace, do you want to say something in a minute? Just a minute.
Yes, thank you everyone for your presentations. I'd also just like to reiterate something Flora has insisted on, is the importance to organize and to have the collective voices of women represented. That is very, very important. And this year, CSOs, feminist movements, and tax justice activists have an opportunity to advance tax justice in the various fora that are being held. The 3-year negotiations for UN Tax Convention, we have FFD4 and various other fora. So in these forums, we need to push gender responsive budgeting and to push governments to adopt gender forward policies. So that would be what I would add on to what has already been said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. You have really delved deeper into a lot of the reflections and as well providing a clear chart in terms of way forward. That was truly, truly wonderful. I will now call upon Sonia to now from Graphic Harvest to share a brief presentation, illustration on the campaign, and then as we draw near closing.
Thank you, Maureen. Can you all see the graphic on screen? Yes. Okay. Super. So I've been sitting in on some of the sessions and kind of listening to the discussions and trying to create an illustration that captures the essence of the discussion. So it really runs kind of clockwise and kind of from left to right. So I'll take you through it. Okay. So we really start here with showing that women perform up to and even more than 70% of unpaid care work worldwide. And although this is a huge contributor to national GDP and care is at the foundation of our societies and economies, we kind of uphold these economies. All of this work is invisible and it's not counted as part of GDP. And because of this, women continue to lack rights and dignity, and they become the most vulnerable. And it keeps them locked in poverty, this, constant being unseen and uncounted in all the work that they're doing. And yet the discussions also are showing that, and it was just mentioned again, that lots of governments are also having to service huge national debts. And so a lot of the money that is being generated in the economies is going up to servicing debts. And also we have so much of the money in economies going up into tax havens, different tax loopholes, and illicit financial flows. So money is moving out of the countries, out of the systems, and it's not being invested back in. And even when it is invested back in, because women are not counted, they're not visible in the system. And so they stay locked into the cycle. And so then we get to the UN Tax Convention. So starting this year and running till mid-2027. And this really represents a key opportunity and hope, because we have a potential to change this on a global scale, because we are renegotiating tax systems on how different countries relate to one another and what they allow. So it's really a case of being able to combat these illicit financial flows, and it represents potentially to create a transformation, a paradigm shift. And so what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to achieve progressive taxation, as opposed to here we've got on the side here regressive taxes, where we adding value-added tax, we taxing from the poor more and more, and they're getting less and less. So how do we shift to progressive taxation so we can tax the rich and the large corporations and ensure that they pay their fair share of what they're taking out of economies? And so we shift to this image where women can be part of societies and economies that work for all, and they're not carrying the burden for everybody else. So how do we create systems that tax the rich, that tax the big economic producers, and this money then gets put into robust public services? And then again, what's really important, what was mentioned just earlier, is that we need gender disaggregated data so we can understand, we don't just lump everything together, we can understand how specific things affect men and women differently. So we can create gender responsive public services, healthcare, education, childcare. We can spend our taxes in a way that takes women and men's different needs into account. And so if we get a little bit more into the detail into the UN Tax Convention itself, one of the problems is in its terms of reference, it recognizes the need to change tax systems so we have sustainable development and not this continuing bringing countries into further poverty. But what it's not recognizing is that gender equality is a key piece of this puzzle. And so we really need to, and this is what we're doing, is push to include gender in this conversation. Again, that need for gender disaggregated data. We need the data to be able to then get the agenda on the table. So what can we do? So we need to urge our governments to take action, demand reform, create, one woman mentioned, we create the rice cake strategy, where it's pressure from the top and pressure from the bottom that eventually creates that big shift. So that is, again, what was said just earlier, organizing, especially getting women's voices on the ground and making sure that we create those political ground conditions to help these negotiations happen. And in specific, what can we do? We can articulate what's at stake. A lot of governments don't understand why this is a key part of the bigger sustainable development picture. And then we need to mobilize the governments, and we need to monitor the negotiations over the next year and a half to make sure they're moving in the right direction and keep putting that pressure on. So that is the graphic. You're welcome to pop comments in the chat if there's anything you feel is wrong or seriously missing. But yeah, I hope it captures some of the essence and it's useful for you and for the process going forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sonia. This is truly perfect. And For the participants, feel free to even if it's to comment, the panelists, or to comment, Sonia, it would be nice to just hear from you. But then this truly is quite good, and it is indeed a good graphical illustration of the campaign so far and capturing the demands and truly as well in terms of what we need to do moving forward. So we are now almost coming to the end of the webinar and the closure of this particular session. So in just a few minutes, in terms of next steps, and especially for the Tax and Gender Working Group, so we'll be having the Tax and Gender Working Group strategy launch. We're looking at having this within the month of May, as well as the launch of the FFTG3 guide, the Framing Feminist Taxation Guide as well, to be launched by May 2025. Part of the key things we also are embarking to do as a working group, it's to develop an advocacy strategy that is geared towards calling for a gender transformative UN tax convention. This has been one of our key campaign demands, and it's something that we are looking forward to seeing it through and ensuring that the final document that we come out with as a UN tax convention then also includes gender considerations. The key moments of action for the group and also for us by extension to really be aware of is FFD4, of course, the UN tax negotiations as well. Our urge is that please continue engaging with us on our social medias. We will be doing some recaps next week and the following weeks after, just to ensure that the messaging around the Global Days of Action truly continues even well beyond the campaign period. The campaign newsletter and the report should be out by next week, and we will circulate the same. The next Tax and Gender Working Group meeting will be on the 3rd of April at 2 p.m. CET or 1 p.m. UTC. And then, of course, if you would wish to join the Tax and Gender Working Group, feel free to send an email to info@globaltaxjustice.org and CC Maureen at globaltaxjustice.org, and then we can guide you on the next steps forward. I would truly love to appreciate the core team that has been, the team that has been behind the planning of these Global Days of Action. So we had a Global Days of Action core team. I'd also, of course, wish to appreciate our GATJ team as well, by extension. And on this one, I'd like to give special recognition to Alex, who has been running the comms bit, a bit behind the scenes, but truly without her and running all these things, then possibly would not have as much success as we have today. And then, of course, the larger Tax and Gender Working Group as well, for their support and for their participation in this year's Global Days of Action. We have wonderful panelists who are drawn from the Tax and Gender Working Group. We've had even others join us in the various webinars that we've been having, and even for the various activities that have been running. And that truly has been the work of the Tax and Gender Working Group. And then, of course, we'd also like to specifically acknowledge and thank our regional partners, TJNA, TAFJA, Justicia Fiscal, Canadian for Tax Fairness, just truly for the work that they have done so far in terms of supporting us in this work. As part of our final remarks for this particular, as we come to the end of this campaign, let us all commit to sustaining this fight and strengthening alliances and pushing for concrete reforms at the national, regional, and at the global levels. A fair tax system is possible, but only if we demand it and hold decision makers accountable. Let us not forget, 1, a system that claims neutrality perpetuates injustice. Let us not forget, 1, a system that claims neutrality perpetuates injustice. Throughout this campaign, we have exposed a fundamental truth. Tax systems that claim to be neutral are in practice deeply biased. A tax policy that fails to account for gendered economic disparities does not merely overlook inequality, it entrenches it. 2, rebuilding the social organization of care and reclaiming care as a public good. Care work is the invisible foundation of our economies, yet it remains chronically undervalued and underfunded. That is why we must continue to demand for progressive taxation to fund gender transformative public services. Governments must shift away from tax models that disproportionately burden women and instead implement policies that ensure that those with the greatest ability to pay contribute their fair share. 3, the upcoming UN tax convention negotiations provide a historic opportunity to push for a truly equitable global tax system, one that no longer marginalizes the global south or ignores gender justice. We cannot afford to be silent. We must demand that gender perspectives are central to these discussions, ensuring that tax policies actively work to close the inequalities and not to widen them. While this year's Global Days of Action on Tax Justice for Women's Rights is concluding, our advocacy must not stop here. Let us carry forward this momentum with renewed urgency and an unshakable commitment to transformative change. Together, we will keep pushing for a world where tax policies are truly just, care is valued, and economic systems serve all, especially they serve all. Let us continue the fight for progressive taxation, gender justice, and an inclusive economy. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you so much for engaging with us. This officially marks the end and the close of our Global Days of Action 2025. But let us continue with the messaging. Let us continue with the work even moving forward. So I wish you all a wonderful rest of your day or night, depending on your time zone. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Maureen, and to all from the Philippines. Good night.